I appreciate all the good words, and I really am. I'm surprised to be listed in with all of those nice words, uh, but am pleased that Auburn has had the opportunity to make such a major contribution to the space. And I guess I am fortunate, maybe one of only a few that have seen it all happen from the very beginning. And it's been nice to be a part of it. And being a part of Dr. Van Brown's team was certainly an experience that I'll never forget. And I felt like I was treated very nicely with the Germans and the German team. They worked me right in when I went to work for them. I had, as you heard, my background leading up to going and joining the team. But Dr. Van Brown, I want to just say a few words about. He was a very exceptional individual, and he was, I guess, one thing, it definitely a genius as far as a technical. And he was multi-talented technically, and that just showed in the way he led the team. And he had, in addition to being technically very astute, he just had a personality, a shining personality, and he was just a joy to be around. He just was, and he made everybody feel good. He didn't like to be called, the leader. He just said, we have a team and we all work together. And he tried to make all of us believe that. And well, we knew the truth, that he was the guy that was his. And but he did have a personality, not only a natural as a leader, but he had such I guess, a positive attitude, and he's always smiling, and he felt completely at home talking to the janitors or to the president. The president and Congress in particular. Dr. Van Brown was the Congress. If we needed help and funding and something, Congress wanted to hear from him other than our administrator. Well, that's doesn't always make for good relations at the top, but we always used him as our spokesman, and he really took care of some very sticky situations, and as far as the funding that we got through the years. But I was just fortunate to be there in that early years, and Dr. Van Brown had brought this 120 of his best people after World War II, and he had a complete team. He wanted to bring over, if you can believe it, 500 people to surrender. I didn't want to get caught with the Russians, and that was a major problem. Dr. Van Brown managed to get his team close to the American lines, and ended up negotiating till he got permission to bring 120 of those, and he handpicked those out of his huge operation that he had in Germany. But he had an arrangement. He was a master organizer, and he was the way he had the organization set up. He had 8 what I call fiefdoms of engineers that covered key disciplines that need for rocket development. And that was propulsion and structures and guidance control, air ballistics, testing. Testing was for engines and the launch operation. But yeah, the 8 of his senior people that all most of them PhDs, and they were the 8 leaders that he brought with him. He had a senior staff that was about 12 or 15, and 8 of those were the leaders. And I just was most fortunate to get assigned. Well, I'd asked to be in the control group, and they accepted that. But I was very fortunate to be assigned to the leader of the guidance control area, and that was Dr. Walter Horseman, and he was my mentor and my leader, and I worked for him directly for about 20 years, and then that was when the German team finished the lunar program, and most of them retired. But anyhow, I just received extremely good treatment, and I brought in and met other Auburn people that in those early years, and I would say none of us are superstars, and I'm glad. I was asked to list the superstars, and I just didn't feel like I belonged to that. I didn't belong to those people, so we got this guy. He's a superstar. And he's one of those that just came and worked right on through the top, and then disappeared the industry, and now he's back, working, supporting the program. But anyhow, Todd's a great guy, and I mean he's a superstar, and so I said need one to know him, and but I understand, going to tell you some of those leaders. But I was most fortunate because of my assignment to my mentor, and he sort of took care of me, and I rose through the ranks, and I always reported back to him. I was a part of his operation, and we had many people in my group, let's say in the guidance control area, many Auburn folks that came in. Of course, I had some influence on some of that, but I did want to make a point that one of the things, we had an extremely good relationship with the German team. Not only Dr. Von Braun and his philosophy, but all the people that we had to interface with, they were extremely polite to the Americans. And of course, we had up and down the line as far as the Germans, but they hired in mostly at the just out of college level, and I was I guess fortunate to be able to go in and get involved immediately, but I had one trouble with the Germans. They always wanted to call me Mr. Moore, and I just didn't feel good. They were all 10 years or 20 years older than me, and so I kept telling them, I'm not Mr. Moore, but I did call all of them Mr., I'll tell you, and that was out of respect, either Mr. or Doctor. But anyhow, they were just extremely kind to me. We had such I know I'm running over time, but I need to just cut it off, I guess. But but I'm enthusiastic about it. I mean, I look back on it, and there's so many good times and that I enjoyed, but also the fact that we had almost no attrition. And I look back just recently and wrote down the names of about 20 Auburn graduates that I had close association with. They came in early, and of course we moved in the 1960s. We moved to NASA, but we had already spent 10 years with the Army. But we in 1960, early 60, of course, end of the year, our president had declared that we were going to have a national association of space, and we were not selected to start with, but when President Eisenhower realized the record that we had of weapons, which sort of balanced the Russians with those weapons that we developed, and entering the first space state, he made the decision that was over against the thinking of some people in the headquarters in NASA, to take the Von Braun team, and he named it by that. That's the Von Braun team, and they would be the booster, and the booster not only the boosters for the smaller programs, but the big things like the Saturn V, and but they had one clause in there when the administrator presented to Congress, and that was not only didn't describe the detail other than they included in there something very significant. It was to include guidance and control. There was some controversy because our sister center wanted all the controls to be in there. I'm talking too long about it, but anyhow, that's sort of the situation, and I would say that we have still a close camaraderie. I'm still staying involved with we have a group, the Marshall Retiree Association in Huntsville, and we are active, and I'm still involved in that board. And, but we've got 200 or so members. We still get together frequently. But the point I wanted to make is the lack of attrition. And that's the reason that we were able to do the lunar landing. We had the experience behind us, and we had the technique that Dr. Von Braun led, that anything that worked in an earlier program, if it worked, you can get by with the next step, and rather than always trying to invent something new. And I mean, the 8 team leaders, the lab directors, they directed that, and that's the way we worked. And I can look back and like in the guidance control, and the things, one thing that just in particular mind that we used in the first rocket, the Redstone, was we used this really very reliable thing of the amplifiers. They call them magnetic amplifiers, which is that's getting into great detail. But I just want to say that we used that on the Redstone to drive the vanes, and it was carried forward through every other program, including on the rocket that took man to the moon. We used magnetic amplifiers because they are one ever failed. They're just like a transformer, but you can use them for adding, subtracting, and things like that. But anyhow, that is something that I think was a major. It's remarkable, really, that we implemented the program, the Man to the Moon program. We fired 11 of the Saturn V's, and we had these Saturn 1s and 1B's that we used for testing everything. Test. That was also part of Von Braun's philosophy. Not only did he believe in analytically actually designing something, but he wanted everything tested. We ended up generally firing at least 2 rockets before we put a man on it, and that's what we did with the Saturn, and proved that we could put the rocket in Earth orbit and bring it back without man and control. But anyhow, I just that is more than I'm my time, I'm sure. Ron is telling me I'm way late. And but why didn't you yell at me? I'm hard of hearing, by the way. And so Ron always, you'd think he's yelling at me, but he's trying to be sure I can hear. Todd, you be glad to know this is my better ear. But
that's why I'm on this side.
If I can, if any specific questions, we haven't had time to even till this morning talk about this. We did that 5 minutes at breakfast. So, but anyhow, I'd be glad to answer questions or however you want to handle it. But
I feel like just saying, ladies and gentlemen, a national treasure, Brooks Moore. I can't follow that up. As a matter of fact, people of my generation, I think we feel like we're standing on the shoulders of the giants that were that generation. Those were the folks that really, no kidding, took us somewhere we haven't been in a way that I don't know will ever be replicated that way. We just aren't in the same circumstances we had before. But what's really kind of interesting to me when we pair us here together, I started thinking about why we're up here, and a lot of what Brooks said, I feel the same way. It's like, why am I up here? There's a whole team of people that make this thing happen, and I'm going to name a few people. I started thinking about it this morning, but our careers are kind of parallel. He built a rocket first, and I don't know if you caught the importance of that, but he was the first non-German to run a major lab at Marshall Space Flight Center. You know, it was pretty much a German-run place for at the beginning there, and that was to me that's an honor. He became a member of the club, and he was an Auburn graduate doing that, and so part of that legacy is that, you know, for the next 50 years, Auburn has been a trusted source of engineers to solve the toughest problems at NASA. And then from that rocket came Skylab, and what was interesting about that is we then went to Space Shuttle, and we also have Walt Walsos in here, and he was just telling me, if you guys have ever watched a Space Shuttle when it goes up and it flips upside down, he'll tell you exactly why it does. It's because of a computer program that, you know, he wrote, and he didn't plan it that way. It's just what the data told him. And then from Space Shuttle, at some point, they were kind of running out of things to launch, and somebody conceived of something called the space station, and they realized, you know, we could use that space shuttle on space station. So that kept Space Shuttle flying for another 15 years. And I graduated in 1990 in materials engineering, and one of our board members, Jim Cooper, his brother-in-law, Fred Bickley, was here getting a PhD, and we studied together after the Challenger failure. He was taking a sabbatical, and Ann Whitaker, who was running also a materials engineering PhD from Auburn, was running the lab there at the time, was sending her people down here to get PhDs while we weren't flying, and Fred and I studied together. That's how I ended up at NASA. He just said one day, when you graduate, you need to come up and find me, and I did. And I thought I was going to go work for my dad in pulp and paper industry, and I ended up at NASA, and 30 years later, still there. But I started on Space Station, which was a justification to keep Space Shuttle flying. And the irony of that is the space station became the justification for Commercial Crew, which is how Elon Musk got started on the Commercial Crew and the Falcon rockets you see today. And then as space station starts to end, we find ourselves yearning to get back to exploration, and that's how the Space Launch System came around. And so my career has been 11 years on Space Station, and then kind of the 8 years in science, messing around in science for a while, and then on the back end working on the Space Launch System. And a lot of parallels, a lot of selling to Congress. He mentioned Von Braun had to do those kind of things, and I am no Von Braun by any stretch of the imagination, but some of the same skill sets you have to have. And I told somebody I was employee number one, and 5 years later, to get through critical design review, we had 1,100 contracts in 44 states. And there's a reason we had 1,100 contracts in 44 states. If you want to get money appropriated, you've got to go make sure every state is bought in. I mean, that's just how it works, right? So I think Von Braun knew that, and I studied how he did whatever it took. The other thing is, it's not really about management at that level. It's about leadership. And so I studied, he did stuff with Disney. He did stuff with Harper's Bazaar. He did stuff with on TV and went out and sold the rock. I did everything I did. I did Comic-Con. I did South by Southwest. I would do whatever and just go out there and talk about exploration and try to get people excited about it, because I knew if we lost that, if we lost the public, we weren't going to get the support. We needed to get the money to make it happen. I think at the peak of the Apollo program, there were 400,000 people working that. And so Brooks was one of the 8 people leading those 400,000 people. And, back then, Marshall was also running Kennedy Space Center, and Stennis and Michoud. We were pretty much running the agency. And there was this kind of almost Auburn, Alabama type relationship between Marshall and Johnson, because they had the crew, they had the manned Space Center, but we knew how to actually get it done. And so, and that rivalry is still there today. I'll just say that, and it feels a lot like the Iron Bowl every year when it comes around. But I would just say that one of the questions we were asked to talk about, Brooks, is how Auburn prepared us for this, or how Auburn has influenced the program. If any of you have never seen Bo Jackson give his commencement address, go watch it. It's on the top 100 commencement addresses ever. But he talks about showing up here and being a punk. But when he graduated, he was a man. And he really talks about what happened as part of his time here at Auburn. And 15 years later, I got the chance to do something similar, and I did something similar. I did this thing where I went back in time and talked to myself in college and smacked myself around for getting up late and not appreciating the community that is Auburn. And I think one of the things that is a differentiator for this school, we talk about family, is this place surrounded people like me. I was a punk, but I had professors, mentors from Auburn, and even when I went to NASA, people like Dave Mobley, who didn't get a lot of notice here for a long time because he was just one of these quiet people that got stuff done. He's also in the Alabama Engineering Hall of Fame now because somebody finally went, hey, what about Dave Mobley? Dave was the chief engineer on Space Station, and I was a lab lead working for him, and his leadership, he was hard. He was hard on people, but it's what made you stronger. Professors here, I remember missing a final because I didn't go to class like the last week, and Dr. Jimian allowed me to come out to his house on a Saturday with his wife sitting at his kitchen table to take my final. I mean, just those kind of things. And so, I mean, to me, that's something that's uniquely Auburn, something that's unique about this place. We're not just a diploma factory. It's a family. It's about making people, shaping them into leaders. And I do think, that one of the things that makes Brooks special is that he is a leader, and he pays it forward. Brooks is one of the reasons I'm on this council. He just came up one day going, you ought to do this. And I had no idea what the council was at the time. Someday, I hope to be 40 years from now, still above ground and be able to do something like this with somebody sitting next to me. And, it's been a great ride. But I don't want you to think it's just us two. There are a lot of Auburn people that are involved in the space community. I mentioned Walt. I just heard that story for the first time this morning. I mean, I hear that kind of stuff all the time, though, of the little. I was Robert yesterday from Glenn, Robert Carter. He was telling me that we were in front of Jeff Ferguson talking about to get the core stage welded. It's this 200-foot tall vertical assembly center. When we first built it, it was canted, and it was because somebody didn't get the flatness right at the bottom. We had to take the whole thing back apart again. And Robert starts telling me that he had a year earlier had told them that they better pay attention to this, and they didn't. And he was telling me about having a fight with one of my guys, Tony Lavoie, who I love, and he was running core stage, but I didn't hear this part of the story. But he knew, and he was speaking up, and Tony didn't come to me. So there's Auburn people out there solving these problems all the time. And I just started this morning thinking 6 astronauts, including astronauts that have gone to the moon. I mentioned Dave Mobley, Kenny Mitchell. Astronauts stay alive on the space station because Kenny Mitchell was the environmental control and life support lead for the space station. I mean, his team, especially when you hear about regenerative life support, if you're going to go to Mars, you don't. There's no oxygen. You just gotta regenerate it. There's no water. You've got to sweat it out and regenerate it. That's Kenny. Dan Mitchell, a software guy, set up the whole system that runs the software of the Space Launch System. Dave Woods, the chief engineer on the solid rocket boosters. Tom Owens, he and I graduated materials engineering together in 1990. There were only 10 of us. One of the other guys was Tom Owens. He led the fast track engine, which is the engine that became the Merlin engine on the SpaceX, which enabled commercial crew. And now he's gone on and he's a doctor now. He's a radiologist. But I remember him saying to me, fresh out of school, I want to build a rocket. And so what's fun is we go to church together and, hey, Tom, we actually built a rocket. If you'd stayed around a little longer. I mentioned Rob Carter. The other thing about Rob Carter is he was involved in friction stir welding. People used to use different welding techniques back in the day, but almost everybody making large aerospace structures today uses friction stir welding, and that's Rob Carter. Fred Bickley, a lot of people don't know this, he led the study to, one of the reasons Walt was doing that study he was doing was because it allowed 8,000 more pounds of payload when you fly. It was just a more efficient way to fly. Fred Bickley did the study that said, hey, why don't we stop painting the external tank? We can save 6,000 pounds there. Dana Easy, she's a younger engineer, but she was the Marshall lead on certifying the Falcon 9 launch fork crew. Had a team of Marshall people that were helping make them successful. Chris Crumley, he's been involved around here a lot. He actually ran everything from the core stage up on the rocket for several years under me. Another unsung hero, I had lunch with him this week, Matt McCollum, graduated in applied physics, is an EMI expert. A lot of people don't know this. It was a big deal getting that first SLS launch off the ground, but a week or so before that happened, or a week or so before the first attempt, there was a lightning strike. And a lot of people were worried about it, but Matt wasn't, because when I was the program manager, Matt came to me and said, you need to make the catenary towers this high, and if you do them this high, no matter where the lightning strikes, you're going to have a shield around the rocket and it's going to be fine. That's Matt, the unsung hero, still working in the labs today after 34 years. So I guess that I'll wrap up with that, just saying, it's not really about us, it's about the team and it's about this institution creating people that are solving. And this is just NASA. You could take any one of you out here and in any industry have these same kind of discussions. So I'll probably pause there.
Dr. Taylor, as Todd mentioned, Auburn being a trusted source, can you kind of talk about some of the research that we have going on, the partnerships that we have with NASA currently?
Well, should have prepped me for that ahead of time. Probably the largest contract that we've had recently with NASA in terms of financial relationship, but real, honest to goodness research relationship has been in materials, particularly additive manufacturing. A few years ago, with our faculty here, our good friend Mike Ogles, we formed this National Center for Additive Manufacturing Excellence. It was a partnership with NASA Marshall, and I'll remember this from now on. The day that Chris Roberts and Mike Ogles and I sat on the 9th floor. Where was your office?
Ninth floor.
9th floor, right down the hall from your office with several engineers, Larry Leopard, maybe Joseph Pelfrey, I can't remember who else was in that room. And we, on the whiteboard, sketched out what would this additive manufacturing center look like, a partnership between NASA Marshall and Auburn. And very quickly, we did that. Started with a small cooperative agreement, and that initially led to small work on additive manufacturing, metal additive manufacturing, but then that became a very large contract that was looking at how do we additively manufacture liquid fuel rocket motors, and we worked with contractors all over the country to develop that technology. That's probably the largest thing. That's been about a $15 million effort probably.
Can I add a little color to that? So, you know, I being a materials engineer, I love that idea, and kind of from a leadership perspective, got behind it. But what I thought was really interesting in the way Auburn approached this, they found a guy in the materials lab, John Vickers, who is an Alabama graduate, but he loves additive manufacturing, and Auburn partnered with him, and he brought that here instead of to Alabama, and it was really a credit to folks like Mike Ogles who convinced him that we were going to be all in together. And fast forward to maybe a month ago, I'm on the board of Blue Origins. I go out to Kent, Washington. There's a room that is as big as a football field with some 100 additive manufacturing, large-scale additive manufacturing machines running 24/7, 365. Some of them have 4 lasers. They've come up with their own alloy, and they are making engines for their New Glenn rockets today. You're going to be seeing these engines, and for the Vulcan rocket, that's all coming out of what, you know, Marshall and Auburn have been doing. The technology that comes up out of that enables the future of what it's going to look like when rockets fly 5 and 10 years down the road. Sorry.
So no, that's great, and that's a big credit to today Nima Shamsai Shui Shao that was recognized yesterday at the awards ceremony for one of the research award winners for us. But it goes back to people like Tony Overfeld. It goes all the way back into materials engineering, long time of work. That's where you came from. So a significant amount of materials engineering work, I would say, has been a long-standing, you know, kind of connection between Auburn and NASA Marshall. But it goes beyond that. Electrical engineering, we talked about yesterday in the council meeting. Masood Majuri Samani, he's doing work on space manufacturing. How do we take a laser and melt lunar regolith and make a structure on the surface of the moon? There's work on habitat. There's all kinds of things that we're doing. And those.
What I love about that is that if you are going to live and work on the moon, the laws of physics are the laws of physics. It is not cheap getting anything from here to there. So we have what's called in situ resource utilization. You have to solve a problem like that. How do you build structures on the moon? How do you get oxygen and hydrogen from the moon or from the Mars surface? And so the fact that Auburn engineers are working on this, I can guarantee you 20, 30 years from now, this is going to be how we do it.
Yeah. Looking at Greg Harris, I mean, there's advanced manufacturing things. How do we keep the manufacturing capacity in the United States to be able to build those vehicles that we need, those systems that we need? The other day, early this week, we had dinner with Jody Singer, the current director of Marshall Space Flight Center. We talked about cryofluid management, nuclear thermal propulsion. Those are things that, you know, that we have connections with, that we're trying to help with. And then, I don't know, I'm looking for Brian Thorough around the room, so Brian can help me, but space exploration missions. Toshi, one of your faculty members, is doing work not just on the space, like the vehicles and things, that the transportation systems that we've had such a close relationship, but now our faculty are involved in missions. The DART mission, we're going and hitting an asteroid and bringing things back. You know, our faculty are involved in those missions. So you look across the college, there are all kinds of things that we're able to do.
Yeah, and you could have had Jim Odom up here talking about Hubble. You know, I mean, it's changed the way we view ourselves in the universe. That's an Auburn engineer ran that program too. Yeah.
Listen, I want to be sure y'all understand what this guy is. He is the only person that from our group that became the center director at Marshall. Hey, I want to ask for a moment, I've forgotten how you ask, a moment of personal reminiscing, since we've used up most of the morning. But I want to, I've been proud of what we've done when this council, all the way back, I was fortunate to get on around 1970, I think. But when I look at the council today and last year and the year before, and the numbers of people and the enthusiasm and the accomplishments, it's unbelievable. And I just happened to run across recently a picture of 45 years ago, what the council looked like, and I counted them, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There were 9 of us, and this was the full crew. And I wanted to just read those names to you, if you'll pardon me. So, Alan Barton, Jim Edge, Harry Burns, Powell Williams, Billy Land, Ed Gentle, Louis Evers, this is a familiar name, Michael McCartan. That was Granddaddy, y'all. I think we've got 3 generations that have been, that's brought back real fond memories. And then myself and Jack Lee, not to be confused with the Jack Lee has a and then is one of our ex-center directors, and he happened to be University of Alabama graduate. But this Jack Lee is one of our original members, and as far as I don't know how many of these folks survived, but it's like ironic that this Jack Lee, it just lives 1 block from me, and we've lived next to each other for 60 years. He's still there, and I'm still there, so there's still 2 of us there. But thank you, and I apologize for that, but anyhow, I just want you to hear and be proud of, and when I walk the campus, I cannot believe it's the same place where I went to API, and we had 2 or 3 buildings, old buildings, and I walk the campus now, and it doesn't really look like Auburn, Alabama. But I just am so pleased, and members of this council have been keys, many of you, in bringing this about as far as the improvements of the facilities. But that same character there, the Auburn spirit, and I'm just so pleased to have been a part of it and have been able to, I think, help to bring that sort of spirit around to our space program with the friendships that we had among ourselves, and with Germans. And I had, like I told you, I had great trouble getting them to call me anything other than Mr. Boer, even though I called all of them. But I finally cut through there, and I became to many of them Brooksy. So I got a nickname. So anyhow, that just shows the relationship we had, though. But thank you, and I promise I won't say another word.